Ahoy! Today the New World devs announced something that I absolutely did not expect them to say at this point. I expected it at some point in the future, but not now. So they were asked if there could be PvE only weapon perks for legendary weapons that only work if you're not flagged, and the response was that they're moving away from very specific perks, including perks that affect certain types or even family types. They said they still want to separately balance PvP and PvE, and they're working on something for that. But they expanded on the initial statement here when they were asked if they're planning to reduce, simplify or remove the ward system. The answer was yes. They consider the ward system overly complex and you have too much gear to chase, and that chase is not fun. They think the classless system of New World is super fun, but people are so occupied with getting Bane, Resilient and Ward gear that they don't get the chance to enjoy the fun stuff. Due to that, they're planning to remove complexity. They said the current gearing system is fun initially when you get some better gear to fight against Corrupted and feels good at the start, but later it develops into you can't play because you don't have the max requirement to be as fully optimized as possible. In other words, you don't have 625 of every Ward type and every Bane type. They say this created a not fun system and it's safe to say it'll be gone by the end of the year. Further, they wanted to stress that this is a result of player feedback. This came especially in context of the Forge, where we had two different types once again, which people didn't like. And this got the ball rolling more of people expressing their dislike with wards and them seeing that a lot more than before. And I can absolutely see that. I saw the forums afterwards and it was expressed a lot more often. As such, Ward and Bane are going to be making an exit from New World and will not resurrect like people do. They still like the preparation loop for dungeons and they don't think that ward gems are the right way to go, but what they're thinking about doing is using the current ward potions but making them last for the full expedition, because they are lightweight and also easy to switch for different types. It's worth keeping in mind that in a previous Q&A they also said they want to rework the old expeditions so they have more consistent types across enemies as well, so you likely won't have to chug 3 to 4 ward potions per expedition. Now it is worth keeping in mind that they didn't specifically say that this will happen with the expansion. Obviously this would be a very good point for this to happen, but they did also say that this is something that came up with the Forge, so it is possible that things for the expansion were already planned at that point and maybe we will have Ward and Bane for a little bit longer and then towards the end of the year it'll be gone. But maybe we'll get it for the expansion. We don't know at this point yet. We'll hear more about that later. I just wanted to point out that that one is not 100% certain. What surprises me about this is, while I know pretty much no one likes Ward and Bane, a lot of the endgame loop currently revolves around these systems exactly, and they must have a lot of confidence in having sufficient endgame content without people having to grind for Ward and Bane in order to make this step. And I think that's very interesting because that makes me curious what they have planned, what will be happening in the expansion, what activities we can expect at that point. If the removal happens in tandem with the expansion, I would like to believe that they will actually have to overhaul almost all dungeon loot, so very, very interesting what's going to happen in that regard. It is also interesting that they mentioned Resilient here as well, though they didn't specifically say that Resilient will be removed, only that people are also occupied with that one, but maybe that was also a hint. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what we'll grind towards now, and also very happy with the decision because that also means that you can much easier try different builds and upgrade those with their specific perks for your weapon instead, and I think that's a very cool feature of New World. It's fun to run different weapons. I really like that part, so I think that's great. The next question was if we will get traditional raids with trash mobs and multiple bosses. The answer was absolutely. But they said they've made it clear that they want to make a good expedition before they make a raid, which I would say they have done with Forge, so now we're getting the raid, and now they're getting feedback on the Sandworm as a boss. And Scott said once we feel like we're making good raid bosses, we're going to transition to making good full raids. As far as we can tell from the most recent dev talk, they are not quite happy with the results for raid bosses yet, understandably, so I would imagine we'll still have to wait for this one a little longer, but it is cool to know that something like this is on the distant horizon. When asked if they made any progress on hippos, the simple answer was no. When it comes to PvP, we also got a few answers, though the next balance of power is also coming soon. Once that is out, I will of course update you as well, so consider subscribing and clicking the bell for that one. The first question here was if they are happy with the current burst meta and if that's the intended direction they wanted to go with balance. David says that the time to kill definitely feels quicker than it used to be, especially due to the fort change that they did recently. And he says that it's a little faster than we want, but not super far off. He is considering to increase health a little bit or reduce damage a little bit. When asked if there would be more cover added to the OPR map, he said that's something they're looking into. I quote, "It's hard to change the geo in those the way it's created. I'm not exactly sure what's behind that, why that is, but I guess it's something more technical that's not that easy to fix up." He says that range is stronger in OPR than in most other modes, so it is something they are looking at. He was asked why they're buffing the turret damage and HP in OPR but still make you a very easy target while on the turret. He said the high level goal is making turrets a bigger part of OPR, and part of the changes is higher damage resist while using the turret now, so that should help. That's some very interesting answers to the next question. The question was just if there are going to be any updates to open world PvP or territory influence pushes, and I thought they're just going to respond with the standard, yeah, well, Season 3 territory influence push. But they mentioned something here that sounded like it was actually just referring to open world PvP and not territory influence push, maybe, question mark. It's a bit confusing, but the answer here was, yes, later this year there will be changes to make open world PvP more engaging. Some folks may remember the Great Cleave moment of 2022. That was after the PvP track was first released and everyone was going crazy over there. Also, there was another Great Cleave moment right after release when everyone was fighting in Great Cleave in general because it's the easiest area for PvP missions. But either way, they're trying to recreate that in a more systematic way and more gamified. So we can look forward to that at the end of the year specifically. Very interesting, sounds like some form of a PvP hot zones. I know a lot of people want the forced PvP zone. I would think that's not it, because they're saying it's a more gamified version. I would think there's some other incentive behind it, but we'll find out more in the future. Somebody said it seems like the New World team is expanding based on job openings and new faces. How will this affect the speed and depth of future releases? Is there more time allocated to PvP development versus the minimal effort of the last 2 years? They said they're constantly trying to move as fast as they can and respond to players as well as they can. While we may be putting a little more energy toward PvE on some of our releases, I think minimal effort on PvP is not a completely fair statement. This is a quote from Scott. We've made some pretty big PvP changes and we're working on some right now, like cross-world OPR. They also said they're trying to go as fast as they can while doing quality releases. Now, I will say that I don't think they've put in minimal effort, but I definitely think they could have put in some more effort towards PvP in the last 2 years. I understand that something like crossword OPR is hard to implement, but it's also not something that everyone will look at as a new feature and more of a quality of life thing, even though it opens up a lot of new opportunities like matchmaking. There are also other PvP related changes, like for example balance, but those aren't really seen as content. I think the things that really are looked at as updates to content for PvP are things like 3v3s being introduced or a new map being introduced for 3v3s, and in that regard we have had relatively limited content over the last 2 years compared to PvE, where we got new expeditions, new raids, new quest lines and all that. But I am hopeful and so far that it sounds like we're getting multiple significant PvP changes over this year still. I'll very likely release a video tomorrow talking about more details on what I'd like to see from PvP in the future. Then there were also some questions that affect both PvP and PvE or other things. Somebody asked if we could get more drastic hard runes like shapeshifting. David said the hard rune for the Season 3 expansion is probably his favorite one yet. They're trying to go a little crazy and try some fun stuff, but hard runes will be less frequent than before, is something that Katie emphasized here. They will not come from every expedition anymore. They've already said this on the previous Fortune Eternum. They are increasing the time between hard rune drops, but make really cool ones instead. So quality over quantity, and I'm happy with that because I don't think we need a ton of hard runes to choose from. I'd rather have the existing ones be really good and really fun. Somebody asked if we can get information on the new weapon for fall, but they don't want to talk about that at the moment. If you want to know more about that, you can look on my channel though. I have information about that, which should really tell you all you want to know. They were asked what metrics they use to influence the development priority. They look in different places, they use the team's experience, as well as player insights tools, which kinda gather the information from in-game reports as well as from Discord. And they also say that everyone on the team has a different skill set. So if there is extra capacity in a specific area, take for example world art, then they might update something specific to that. So for example some points of interest. So it depends on who is free to work on something as well, and not just purely what people want. They said everything is prioritized by type and group that is capable of doing the work. And that makes perfect sense. You can't have your art team working on inventory management just because you want to get it out quicker. Overall, very good news, and I already told you what's happening in the next 2 days. Consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you'd like to see that. Thanks to my patrons for supporting this video, and thank you for watching. GSloth, out.